From KALW's The Spiritual Edge, this is Sacred Steps, stories of remarkable people who lean on their values and faith to challenge the status quo. I'm Judy Silber. In this country, capitalism is almost like a religion, and land is a resource to be mined. It's a way of thinking that clashes with many indigenous groups. One example is in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, one of the largest areas of untouched wilderness in the United States. There, polar bears step from ice onto land, caribou roam and give birth to their young. In its last days, the Trump administration took steps that would allow oil companies to drill on the refuge's coastal plain. For the Gwich'in people of Alaska, the coastal plain is sacred land. The Biden administration says it wants to stop the drilling. Still, the Gwich'in know political winds can always change. They want permanent protections. In this story, reporter Daysha Eaton takes us to Alaska. She introduces us to one Gwich'in woman who is dedicated to preserving the place where she and her people say life begins.
Everything that matters to Sarah James and to the animals central to her culture is right here. She and I are out walking close to her home near the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. She points to the spongy ground beneath our feet.
Caribou likes to eat that.
Light-colored lichen covers the tundra like snow. That plant helps the caribou digest their food gradually on their long annual migration.
They release nutrition slowly. They're also on the move, burning up energy. So this one helps them retain energy, retain nutritional value in their body.
The lichen, an all-you-can-eat buffet for the herd, is one reason her Gwich'in ancestors chose this as the permanent location for their village.
We're in this valley. And caribou, when caribou's on the move, they tend to come through this valley.
Within sight of where Sarah lives. Here, more than 100 miles above the Arctic Circle, the sky is light 24/7 in summer. Most of her neighbors spend the season outdoors, camping, close to where they can hunt caribou. Even as the world around them has changed, that still counts for 3/4 of what they eat. Although many Gwich'in became Christians when Episcopal missionaries arrived in the 1800s, they continue to believe that spirits inhabit objects and places. Inside her cabin, Sarah shows me a picture that demonstrates how this belief system informs the steeple of the old church in Arctic Village.
Arrows going up with a cross on it, and there's arrow going a forward direction, and in between there's one big lump, another big lump, and then little lump. And that means bless the whole solar system.
Centuries before astronomers and space explorers grasped this, Sarah says the Gwich'in got it.
I'm just really amazed at my people, how much they know, how much they care about the whole universe.
Sarah's in her late 70s. It takes hard work to live here. She says it's good exercise.
We have outhouse. We don't have running water here. I pack my treated water from a river. I still walk. I still rake my yard.
She's lived here in Arctic Village most of her life. One of her first memories is running alongside a dog sled on a hunting trip with her family and eating fresh caribou meat roasted over an open fire. Stories passed down through the generations tell of a time before fur trappers arrived from Canada when even more life thrived here. Mating calls and bird songs filled the air.
It was a land of the plenty, my mom calls it. In the springtime especially, it's so noisy that people have to yell at each other to understand each other.
The story goes that so many migratory birds arrived each spring they cast a shadow over the land. And there were so many fish in the streams and rivers that the water only trickled around them. Then there was the porcupine caribou herd. To Gwich'in people, these animals are not just food.
We care so much for the caribou. We take care of them, and in return, they take care of us. We're in their heart, and they're in our hearts.
Alaska's political leaders have different ideas about what the refuge where the caribou roam is good for. That's generated decades of tension between them and the Gwich'in. Since the late 50s, before Alaska's statehood, the federal government expanded that area for protection. But the prospect of oil and gas development in the refuge has glimmered like a mirage. The government has studied that possibility. Today, Alaska is the only state that doesn't impose income tax or sales tax on its people. Oil production in other parts of the state made that possible. Sarah and her people, the Neets'aii Gwich'in, would rather protect the wildlife refuge than allow oil drilling there. They say the process of oil extraction will threaten the caribou on which they depend, and they contend that the fossil fuel economy isn't sustainable.
Recycle, reuse, reduce, and refuse. And use less oil until we don't have to use oil anymore. And that's what Neets'aii Gwich'in is all about. We want to teach the world in a good way why we say no to oil, and that's our mission.
Sarah didn't speak English until her teens when she went to Bureau of Indian Affairs boarding school in Oregon. Then the agency sent her to learn secretarial skills at a business college in San Francisco. She'd never set foot in a city that big. The rampant consumerism and litter shocked her. But the 60s counterculture fascinated her. So did the convergence of young indigenous people bent on self-determination. When one of them invited Sarah on a boat ride to Alcatraz Island, she had no idea that the spur-of-the-moment sail with her new friends would make history.
To the great white father and all his people, we, the Native Americans, reclaim the land known as Alcatraz Island in the name of all American Indians by right of discovery.
The occupation lasted 19 months, from November 1969 to June 1971. Sarah didn't stay that long. When her father died in 1970, she returned home to Arctic Village. She brought with her a lot of what she'd absorbed in the big city: ideas from the Indian rights movement, knowledge of the laws that applied to Native Americans, and strategies for resistance. She worked in the village school and in tribal government. Sarah also became a mother and focused her activism on saving the coastal plain of the wildlife refuge from oil drilling and pipelines. With reverence, she explains the Gwich'in name for the coastal plain, the sacred place where life begins. That's because every June for thousands of years, the porcupine caribou herd has given birth on that narrow strip of land to the north, inside the refuge.
It's very small, limited area, coastal plain. Only place that porcupine caribou could have their calf safely, quiet, private, and clean. And every birth needs that.
Noise from oil drilling and industrial development drives these animals away. They're not able to deliver their offspring anywhere else.
They can't do it on the foothills. There's predators there. They can't do it on the mountain. It's too cold. So the only place is that one small coastal area up in the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
After they give birth, they nurse and raise their calves until fall, when they move south through the mountains, right down to where we're visiting. Indigenous land claims are complicated, but unlike some tribes, the Gwich'in were able to gain ownership of more than 1 million acres.
1.8 million acres. We're not part of Alaska Land Claim Settlement Act. We got our own tribal government.
Federal Indian law guarantees the right to self-determination, including continued access to subsistence and cultural resources, like caribou. The Native American Rights Fund believes Sarah's tribal government has the legal standing to sue and keep the federal government from carrying out its plan to drill for oil.
And we have a right to be a caribou people. We believe God put us here to take care of this part of the world, earth.